The lights inside the theater dimmed so slowly that the audience barely noticed at first. A low murmur drifted across the room as thousands of people adjusted in their seats, waiting for the next contestant to appear on stage. The giant AGT logo glowed behind the curtains, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Cameras rolled across the aisles, capturing nervous faces, excited whispers, and judges flipping through their notes. Nobody in that room had any idea they were about to witness a moment that would stay in television history forever. Backstage, Jessica Sanchez stood completely still. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides as producers rushed around her. Stage assistants clipped microphones into place while makeup artists gave her one last touch-up. The noise backstage was chaotic, but Jessica heard almost none of it. Her mind was somewhere else entirely. She thought about being a little girl singing in front of a mirror. She thought about all the moments people told her she wasn't enough. She thought about every failure, every rejection, every sleepless night wondering if she still belonged in music. Tonight was more than a performance. It felt like her final chance to remind the world who she really was. A producer stepped closer. "Jessica, 30 seconds. She nodded slowly. From the side of the stage, she peeked through the curtain. The audience looked endless beneath the bright lights. The judges sat quietly at the table, unaware of the emotional storm waiting for them. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair with his usual calm expression. Sofia Vergara smiled while talking softly with Howie Mandel. Heidi Klum flipped her pen between her fingers. The crowd cheered as the announcer's voice echoed across the theater. "Please welcome, Jessica Sanchez." The audience applauded politely as Jessica walked onto the stage. At first, it didn't feel different from any other AGT audition. She wore a simple dark outfit with silver details that reflected the stage lights. Her expression looked calm, but her eyes revealed nerves she couldn't fully hide. The judges smiled. "How are you feeling tonight?" Sofia asked warmly. Jessica took a breath before answering. "Honestly, terrified." The audience laughed softly. Simon leaned forward. "You've performed before. Why so nervous?" Jessica paused. "Because this song means everything to me." The room suddenly became quieter. She continued carefully. "There were moments when I almost gave up on music completely. I started wondering if maybe my dream had already passed me by. But deep down, I still believed I had something left to say." The audience listened closely now. "And tonight," she whispered, "I want people to feel every piece of that journey." Simon nodded slowly. "Well, good luck." Jessica walked toward the center mark on stage. The lights faded into darkness. For a brief moment, the entire theater felt frozen. Then the first piano note played. It was soft, fragile, almost haunting. Jessica lowered her head as the melody filled the theater. When she finally opened her mouth, her voice emerged barely above a whisper. The sound was delicate, emotional, and filled with pain. Every word carried the weight of years. The audience immediately grew silent. People leaned forward. Even the camera operators seemed hypnotized. Jessica sang the first verse with incredible control, allowing emotion to guide every note instead of overpowering it. Her voice floated gently through the room, touching every corner of the theater. Heidi's eyes widened. Howie stopped smiling. Simon remained still, but his attention locked completely onto the stage. Jessica closed her eyes during the second verse. Suddenly, something changed. The emotion inside her voice deepened. It no longer sounded like someone performing. It sounded like someone surviving. Every lyric felt painfully real. The audience could feel it. A woman near the front row wiped tears from her face. Another man placed his hand over his mouth. The atmosphere inside the theater shifted into something electric. Jessica stepped forward slowly as the music began building. Her breathing grew heavier. The drums entered softly beneath the piano. Strings rose behind her. And then came the moment nobody expected. Jessica lifted her head. Her eyes opened. And she unleashed a note so powerful that the entire theater exploded with shock. Gasps erupted everywhere. The sound tore through the room like lightning. It wasn't just technically perfect. It was raw, human, desperate, beautiful. Simon's eyebrows shot upward instantly. Heidi covered her mouth. Sofia looked completely stunned. The audience erupted into screams before the note had even finished. Jessica continued singing, but now the performance transformed into something far bigger than anyone imagined. Her voice soared higher and higher. Every run landed perfectly. Every emotional shift felt genuine. She wasn't simply singing notes. She was telling the story of every person who had ever doubted themselves. The stage lights flashed gold and blue around her as the orchestra swelled. Jessica stood completely still at center stage, yet somehow commanded the entire room with nothing except her voice. The audience couldn't look away. People started standing. One by one, rows began rising before the song even reached its climax. Cameras captured fans crying openly. A teenage girl near the judges held her chest while tears streamed down her face. Backstage crew members stopped working just to watch the monitors. One producer whispered, "Oh my God." Jessica reached the bridge. The music dropped suddenly. Only the piano remained. Her voice softened again, almost breaking. For a moment, she sounded vulnerable enough to collapse right there on stage. And that vulnerability made the performance even more powerful. Simon slowly lowered his eyes. Something about her voice was getting to him. Not because it was loud. Not because it was impressive. Because it was honest. Jessica sang the next lines so quietly that the audience barely breathed. Then she looked upward. The orchestra returned. The lights exploded. And Jessica delivered the biggest vocal moment of the night. Her final chorus hit with unbelievable force. The note she released seemed almost impossible. It climbed higher, and somehow higher still. The crowd lost control. People screamed. Others cried. Several audience members jumped to their feet completely overwhelmed. The judges stared at Jessica in total disbelief. Howie shook his head repeatedly. Heidi's eyes filled with tears. Sophia clapped while crying. But Simon Cowell sat completely frozen. For one rare moment, the man famous for harsh criticism looked speechless. Jessica held the note until the entire room felt like it might explode. Then suddenly, silence. The music stopped. Jessica lowered the microphone slowly. Her chest rose and fell as she tried catching her breath. For 2 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was the kind of silence that only happens after something unforgettable. And then the theater erupted. The audience exploded into the loudest standing ovation of the season. People screamed so loudly the sound echoed through the entire building. Jessica looked shocked. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. The judges rose to their feet. All 4 of them, Simon included. That alone shocked the audience even more. Jessica covered her mouth as she looked. Around the theater, the applause refused to stop. Fans chanted her name. Jessica, Jessica, Jessica. She began crying openly now. Years of pressure, fear, and heartbreak poured out at once. Simon finally reached for his microphone. But before he could speak, the crowd started cheering again. He waited. Then he smiled slightly. "I honestly don't know what to say." The audience roared. Simon shook his head slowly. "In all the years we've done this show, we search for moments that make people feel something real. Most performances are good, some are memorable, but every once in a while." He paused. "Someone walks onto this stage and reminds us why music matters in the first place." The audience applauded loudly. Jessica wiped tears from her face. Simon pointed toward her. "That wasn't just singing. That was pain, strength, honesty, and talent combined into one performance. And I genuinely believe we just witnessed one of the greatest vocal performances in AGT history." The theater exploded again. Jessica covered her face completely. Howie leaned toward his microphone next. "You know what amazed me most?" he said. Jessica looked up. "You never once tried to impress us. You simply told the truth through music. And somehow that became more powerful than anything else." Sophia nodded immediately. "I had chills the entire time," she said. "Literal chills. You have one of the most beautiful voices I have ever heard." Heidi smiled warmly through tears. "I think every person in this room felt connected to you tonight." "That's very rare." Jessica tried speaking, but emotion overwhelmed her. "Thank you," she whispered. The audience applauded again. Then Simon leaned toward the other judges. A quiet conversation happened between them. Jessica looked confused. The crowd began buzzing with anticipation. Simon suddenly looked back toward the audience. "You know," he said carefully, "sometimes a performance is so special that voting almost feels unnecessary." The audience screamed instantly. Jessica's eyes widened. Heidi laughed in shock. Sophia covered her mouth. Howie grinned. Jessica started shaking. "No way," she whispered. Simon stood slowly. The crowd grew louder, and then he reached toward the golden buzzer. The theater exploded before he even touched it. Jessica collapsed to her knees. Simon slammed the golden buzzer. Gold confetti burst across the theater like fireworks. The audience screamed louder than ever before. Jessica cried uncontrollably as golden confetti rained down around her. Music thundered through the speakers. Fans jumped from their seats. Backstage crew members cheered wildly. Even camera operators struggled to keep steady shots because the entire room had descended into complete chaos. Jessica remained on her knees, overwhelmed. Years of doubt disappeared beneath falling gold. Simon walked onto the stage alongside the other judges. Jessica stood slowly, still crying. Simon hugged her tightly. "You earned this," he told her. The audience continued cheering non-stop. Jessica looked out at the crowd through tears. For so long, she had wondered whether people still believed in her. Tonight, she finally had her answer. Backstage interviews flooded social media within minutes. Clips of the performance spread across every platform at unbelievable speed. Fans called it legendary. Some called it the greatest AGT audition ever. Others said Jessica had delivered the most emotional performance in television history. By midnight, millions of people had already watched the video online. Comments poured in from around the world. "I've never cried during AGT before. That note gave me chills. She deserves to win the entire competition." Simon looked genuinely emotional. This is what real talent sounds like. The performance became impossible to escape. Celebrities reposted it. Music producers reacted to it. Vocal coaches analyzed every note. Fans created emotional compilations using clips from the performance. Within 24 hours, the audition had become a global phenomenon. But behind the scenes, Jessica remained quiet. Long after the theater emptied, she sat alone backstage holding the golden buzzer ticket in her hands. The noise from the crowd had faded. The cameras were gone. The makeup artists had left. Only silence remained. Jessica stared down at the gold-covered paper while tears filled her eyes again. A producer approached softly. "You okay?" Jessica nodded slowly. "I think so." The producer smiled. "You changed something tonight." Jessica looked confused. "What do you mean?" The producer paused. "I've worked on this show for years. We see amazing singers all the time. But every once in a while, someone walks on stage carrying real life inside their voice. People can feel that immediately." Jessica lowered her eyes. For a long time, she admitted quietly, "I thought maybe people forgot about me." The producer shook his head. "No," he said gently. "They were just waiting for this moment." Jessica smiled through tears. Outside the theater, fans still waited near the exits hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Some held signs. Others replayed the performance on their phones. The energy surrounding the audition continued growing hour by hour. Television networks began discussing it the next morning. Radio hosts talked about the impossible note. Entertainment headlines described the performance as breathtaking, emotional, unforgettable. But what truly connected with people wasn't just Jessica's voice. It was the story hidden behind it. People saw themselves inside her performance. They saw heartbreak, fear, failure, and hope. That's why the moment became so powerful. Jessica didn't stand on that stage pretending to be perfect. She stood there as someone who had struggled. Someone who nearly gave up. Someone who kept fighting anyway. Days later, the audition video surpassed tens of millions of views. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Music experts praised her vocal control. Fans from different countries posted emotional messages describing how the performance inspired them. One comment received thousands of likes. It read, "She didn't just sing a song. She reminded people why they should never stop believing in themselves." Jessica eventually read that comment herself. And for a long moment, she simply stared at the screen. Because deep down, that was exactly what she hoped people would feel. Not perfection, not fame, not even victory, hope. Weeks later, during another live AGT episode, the hosts replayed a short clip from Jessica's audition. The audience immediately erupted again before the clip even finished. Simon smiled while shaking his head. "I still get goosebumps watching that," he admitted. The crowd applauded. Even other contestants backstage talked about the performance constantly. Some said it intimidated them. Others said it motivated them. But everyone agreed on one thing. They had witnessed something special. Jessica's journey through the competition only became bigger from there. Every performance carried enormous expectations. But no matter what happened afterward, one truth remained undeniable. That audition changed everything. Years from now, fans would still replay the moment she stepped onto that stage. They would still remember the silence before the first note, the tears in the audience, the impossible final chorus, Simon Cowell standing speechless, the golden buzzer exploding into the air, and the feeling that, for a few unforgettable minutes, music became more than entertainment. It became something personal, something healing, something unforgettable. As the credits rolled on that historic AGT episode, cameras captured one final shot of Jessica standing beneath falling gold confetti, tears streaming down her face while the audience continued cheering around her. It looked less like the ending of an audition and more like the beginning of a comeback the world never saw coming. And somewhere in that roaring theater filled with lights, cheers, and applause, Jessica Sanchez finally realized something important. Her voice had never disappeared. The world had simply been waiting for the perfect moment to hear it again.